We are in the middle of a fight that's beginning now, now that President Obama, over the stimulus spending. And while there's a consensus that in the short term some of the spending might be needed, there is still going to be this battle over the long term. How do we fight that battle over spending and the kind of spending we need to sustain in order to have a broader prosperity and a real economic recovery?
Well, I think we have to drive home the severity of the problem, and I think there's a lot of people, remarkably, who still don't quite understand. We're talking about a really, really serious downturn. This isn't just a little blip. We're talking about losing 500,000 jobs a month. We lost 2.5 million jobs last year, and we can't think we're going to reverse that overnight. So you could understand the idea you don't want wasteful spending. You never want wasteful spending, but the point is we need to spend a lot. We need to do it quickly. And we're going to have to do it for a while. It's not going to be over in 2009. It's not even going to be over in 2010, even in the best case scenario. So this concern that somehow we're going to be spending too much, it's going to go on too long, it's not a realistic concern. It's basically a fantasy. I mean, we have to spend lots of money, and we're going to pay a really big high price in a lot of unemployment if we don't.
One of the studies that I've seen, in fact, suggests that if you're talking about $1 trillion deficit, which is very, very scary to a lot of people, but actually in context, $1 trillion deficit or even a $2 trillion deficit, which is really scary for a lot of people, isn't as scary as it seems.
Well, given the context, there's a couple points to make. First off, we always have to think in these deficits relative to the size of the economy, because 1 trillion, 2 trillion, that's huge numbers. None of us are ever going to see that. But when you compare it to the size of the economy, $1 trillion is a bit more than 6% of GDP. That's a lot. That's not a trivial sum. But it's a manageable amount. We had actually a deficit of 6% of GDP in 1983 when the economy was last in a serious downturn. And if you go back to World War II, we had deficits that were over 20% GDP, and you can do that for short periods of time. We don't want to do that for a long period of time, but you can do that for short periods of time. And again, if the alternative, as it is a huge amount of unemployment, it's almost a no-brainer. We could live with the deficit. We can't live with double-digit unemployment. So that's really the alternative, and people have to understand that. It's not as though we're going to have a balanced budget and we're all going to be happy. We have a balanced budget and we'll be sitting here with 20% unemployment. So that really is the alternative. Now, in terms of how we think about the deficit, some of this money is money that we actually, in effect, ran up years ago. So with the TARP, where you're keeping banks solvent, we really lost that money. We're making up their bad loans, in effect, with that. We really lost that years ago when the banks made the bad loans. We're just honoring their obligations. Also, it's important to point out that the money that we're paying for TARP or for Fannie and Freddie, at least much of that we are going to get back. We won't get back all of it, but we are going to get much of that back. There will be cases where banks go bankrupt. We have to eat the losses, but most of them are not going to go bankrupt, or at least I certainly hope not. I don't think most people think they're all going to go bankrupt.
Right. But the point is that you've been making is that if we're really interested in a sustained economic recovery, that we're going to have to make these kinds of investments along the lines of what President Obama has put forward.
That's right. Building up our infrastructure, making the economy more energy efficient, improving our transportation system, improving our healthcare system. These are all investments that have real payoff. So we'll be richer as a country by having spent this money. So the idea that somehow we're going to assess whether we're rich or poor with the budget deficit, that's crazy. We want to look at the budget deficit, of course, but if we're a real rich country and we have a budget deficit, well, that's the way it goes. On the other hand, if we're a real poor country and we have a balanced budget, we'd feel really stupid.
I keep hearing the argument, you mentioned healthcare, and I keep hearing this argument that to fix a healthcare system is going to, along the lines of what you and a lot of Krugman and a lot of other, certainly our people in our Healthcare for America Now coalition, there is still this sense, and it keeps coming up in the media, that the sums of money for a public plan is just something we can't afford.
Well, that's what the people, there's a lot of interest that will be hurt with a public plan. because it's the whole point is squeezing waste out of the system, and waste is incomes to people. So the drug industry talking about cutting their incomes. They get the projections are for 2012 we'll be spending about $330 billion a year on prescription drugs. Now, if we took away patent protection, just said, okay, what would those drugs cost if we just bought them in a competitive market? We're talking about $30 billion. 330 billion versus 30 billion. Okay, now that's a lot of money. Now we have to make up what the drug industry does in terms of research. We have to find ways to pay for that. But the industry itself says they only pay about 30 billion, 40 billion a year in research. So that still gives us a lot of money to play with. I'm just mentioning that as an example. All through our healthcare system, it's chock full of waste. And obviously that waste is income for people. They're going to get up there and yell and scream, and they're really powerful. They could buy members of Congress. They could buy ads in newspapers. They can get economic studies printed saying that we have to have that waste. They're going to do all that. But the reality is we have an incredible amount of waste.
I won't doubt that. Just take a look at how much they spend per person in Canada, in Germany, in England, in France. Pick your country. They don't spend half as much as we do in most of those countries, and all of them have longer life expectancies. So clearly you can have good health care at a much, much lower cost, but there's special interest groups in the United States that are going to do everything they can to prevent it.
Let me ask you one more question. We're going to be having a Thinking Big, Thinking Forward conference on February 11th here in Washington. And the point of that conference is to get progressives to really think about the long term, and to get the country to think about the long term, as we've discussed, to sort of counter this effort to say, well, okay for 1 or 2 years because we're in a recession, but then we need to really ratchet back. The work of the Peterson Foundation, the people who put together the IOUSA movie, and their push is to get the country into a mode of ratcheting back government and ratcheting back government spending, ratcheting back the safety net. How important and how much of a fight do you think we will have in countering that?
Well, we could easily counter the arguments. The question is, Peterson Foundation has $1 billion. They, I always say I don't mean being outspent, but once it gets over 1,000 to 1, I get a little nervous. That's the issue here. That they have an enormous amount of money. They have an enormous amount of influence. Peterson gets on CBS News, 60 Minutes. He gets on PBS. He's a very visible person. Huge amount of money, huge amount of power. But we have the arguments. We have a great little thing on our website, CEPR.net, which we make fun of their movie IOUSA, and we show that if you just assume that our healthcare costs, per person healthcare costs, and we have a little calculator, we go pick the country with longer life expectancies than us. It's got like 30. And look at what happens to deficit. We don't have a deficit. We have a huge surplus. So the reality is very, very clear. We have a real big healthcare problem. We're the ones talking about that. They're running around trying to scare people. So it's just a question of getting the information out there. In this case, the information is really simple. We have a broken healthcare system that needs to be fixed. If we don't fix it, it's going to cause the economy all sorts of enormous problems. And on top of that, we'll have a budget problem also.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Thanks a lot for doing this.